بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Reem Aloush and I have with me Sister Atika Latifi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. Many of us have heard this ayah amongst the many noble ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala numerous times. Most recently, we've heard its translation uttered in the media, not for the first time. And nor was it the first time that the laws of Islam have been painted as barbaric and backward, non-applicable to our current time. So once again, this particular text was put forth as being problematic. How so? That it appears to be an incitement to violence against women. And not surprisingly then, the discussion turned to how Islam was in need of a rereading in order to make it relevant to our current times. So in this discussion, we're going to explore the understanding of our respected scholars of this ayah, place it in its correct context, and highlight its continued relevance to the life of the human being. Sister Atika, let's get straight into the discussion and the core questions that often arise in people's minds concerning this ayah. Let me ask you, do women need protecting and maintaining? We live in a time, as you know, where many women work, many women are able to spend on their families in order to support their families financially, etc. So does it appear that this ayah is no longer relevant to our times today?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's important, it's important to set a few things straight from the outset. Firstly, that Islam is not gender-biased.
No.
Allah is the one that created the man and He is the one who created the woman. Secondly, that Islam came as a mercy to mankind. So it is for both man and woman. And it did not come to cause a friction between men and women.
As we
otherwise, yes.
Today.
And otherwise there would be disharmony which stands contrary in spreading of this mercy. And thirdly, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established the rights of earning and ownership to both man and woman.
Yeah.
Now, in the context of the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that men are the protectors and maintainers of women. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the responsibilities that given to both men and women to look after the family institution. And the measures that should be taken to protect it from any kind of negative effects.
Which no one would argue against the importance of measures to protect such an important foundation that is the family.
Definitely. And I would like to, give that importance, even mention the commentaries being made by classical scholars.
Please do.
And I would like to quote a couple here. Sayyid Abu al-Ala Maududi rahimullah wrote in his tafsir, the Arabic word qawwam stands for a person who is responsible for the right conduct, safeguard and maintenance of the affairs of an individual, an institution or an organization. Thus, man is governor, director, protector and manager of the affairs of women.
Big responsibility.
Yes, and Sayyid Qutb, and he mentioned in his tafsir that man is in charge of the family institution, as Allah has given him necessary qualities and training to undertake this task and assign to him the duty of meeting the family's living expenses. You know, the ayah clearly described that man is the caretaker in this regard. And whether or not he takes up his responsibility, you know, whether the woman is earning an income and takes on this responsibility or not, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold him accountable.
Will hold him accountable.
Yes, and this is the responsibility that was given to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ar-rijalu qawwamuna, that's it. And he is the qawwam. He is the responsible.
SubhanAllah, very clear-cut text, you know, in this regard. And I think that what is often missing from this discussion is that immense burden of responsibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on the shoulders of the husband, of the man, of the household. And, you know, not necessarily to view it as a privilege, but as that burden, as a responsibility. You know, it only does him service or only does him favour if he really carries out that responsibility to the best of his ability. It's a very important point. I just want to go back to the quote that you gave about Sayyid Qutb, where he spoke about man having the necessary qualities and training. Would you elaborate a little bit further on that?
Interesting, you know, Sayyid Qutb is talking about these unique characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to man, you know, like general physical strength, or slow reaction and response, you know, ability to focus on one matter at one time in a deeper way.
I think, you know, whether people would like to own up to it now or not, a lot of us make those observations about, you know, the general differences in traits and characteristics. You mentioned, of course, the obvious, the generally that the man has been made physically stronger, but also that his response time is a little bit slower when faced with issues, and that focus on, you know, one task at the one time, whereas women, you know, more capable, generally speaking, of multitasking, whatever. So, you know, if man, you know, if the human being is able to make those observations, who is more capable of understanding the nature of the man and the woman than the one who created them?
Yes.
You know, subhanAllah.
And you can see, you know, that these qualities are not superficial qualities.
No, yeah.
You know, they are, you know, part of their physical, mental and psychological constitution. And it's for both man and woman, not just for man.
And so what you're saying is that when giving the responsibilities, of course, you will give the responsibility that's more suited to those particular characteristics and traits and qualities. And similarly, you know, with a woman, not to even say that one responsibility is more superior to another, you know. As you wouldn't even say, you know, that in a business that necessarily, you know, the owner and the manager of the business has a more important task than, you know, another person within the business that, you know, carries other responsibilities, because they're all important, you know, in order to maintain that institution, whether it be the family or the business.
Yes.
Moving on from that, sister, you know, we understand that, alhamdulillah, you know, it's a very ingrained understanding that the best of us are those who are the most pious. The woman understands that, and the man understands that. But how do we reconcile that with a reference in the ayah to man, quoting the translation, excelling the woman?
You know, there's no question that man and woman do not differ, you know, in their humanity. It is true that, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that men and women are equal in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only difference is that of piety, gaining reward, and obeying Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. With reference to the ayah, as you mentioned, that how do we reconcile? That man, because Allah has made one of them to excel the other. This ayah simply talks about the differences of characteristics. The subject here is not the question of superiority. Now, He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, has assigned the role according to the strength and ability, of His creation.
Which is what we touched on
And
previously.
we just discuss about that. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, and He knows best about His creation. I just wanted to quote that, Abu Ala Maududi rahimullah writes in his tafsir, the verb used here, a derivative of the root fadl, is not used to mean that men are superior to women in honor and excellence. Rather, it means that man has been blessed with certain natural qualities and powers that are not being given to women or have been given in a less degree. Of course, here we speak about the general abilities or the qualities of man, like I mentioned, the general physical strength, etc., and the general qualities of women. But it doesn't rule out that few women are more capable or have certain greater physical or psychological qualities that exceed particular men.
Yeah, of course.
No, but the ruling is established, upon that general distinction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, and it's according to their ability. And that's when it comes to the role of leadership. In the family life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned this role to the man, as He created him with those qualities and greater potential to fulfill this role. And He is assigned with a differing role to the woman, according to her characteristics. So in Islamic system, the man is given the responsibility to maintain his family. And this should not be seen as a superior status.
No.
But as an obligation.
And a heavy obligation.
It's an obligation for which he will be held accountable on the Day of Judgment.
I think many of us many women would reflect on whether they would even be want to have this responsibility or this obligation, be asked about it, We know that, when you're in a leadership position, that accountability is even greater and even more difficult. And for any sort of believing woman to kind of really want that more difficult accountability, I don't think any one of us would say that we desire that, SubhanAllah.
It's a greater responsibility. We can see that, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him.
Moving on to the understanding of the concept of obedience in the context of this ayah. Where does that fit into a relationship where there are two adults in the relationship? If one is not superior to the other, where does that concept of obedience fit in?
Before I go into the details of what obedience means according to the ayah or even the reference with the Quran, I would like to make this point clear, that the marital relationship is not, a fixed and a lifeless equation like 1 + 1 = 2.
No.
But it is a relationship with compassion, mercy, and a source of happiness, where one half gives themselves to serve the other. So it's beautiful. I want to give a few of the requirements where how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran and the Islamic texts like Hadith, and supported from there itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in the same ayah about the qualities of an obedient wife, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala said, therefore the righteous women are qanitat, and guard in the husband absent what Allah orders them to guard. And there's a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, after piety of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing is as fruitful for a believer more than a good wife, who obeys when ordered by her husband. When he casts a glance towards her, he is filled by happiness. If he takes an oath counting on her, he justifies it. And when the husband is away, she advises him well, guards herself as well as his property. So from there are many other narrations as well, but from these two we can put down some points like what is required from an obedient wife. First and foremost, devotion and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
First and foremost.
And obedience to her husband. She guards herself, her dignity, her honor in the absence of her husband. And she preserves her husband's children, home and wealth. And you can see one point here, that obedience here is out of willingness. Willingness to obey, but not forced against her, her desire.
This is something that's constantly being thrown at the Muslims and the Muslim women, in particular, this forced oppression, fighting against, these forces of pressure and oppression, where the reality is that we understand our deen and we do this willingly. The obedience to Allah comes willingly, and through that, His command, the willingness to obey all of His commands, including those concerning our husband. This comes through a willingness and through a contentment, and comes through you cannot remove that happiness and that contentment that is linked to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yes, I even want to quote how Sayyid Qutb mentioned, related to this ayah, that Quran does not put this in imperative form. So we can say that, such obedience is a desirable quality of a wife. And the other point which I wanted to mention, that the obedience which we are talking about is based on consultation and mutual understanding, which promotes a healthy family unit.
Certainly, and another thing that you can also add to this discussion is that what is leadership, and what does leadership mean then if there isn't a requirement or an expectation to follow the guidelines that the leadership has put in place? I mean, what would the meaning of a government be if the citizens weren't required to obey? What would the meaning of a business owner be, and manager be, if the employees weren't required to obey?
Yes. Agree with that.
Yeah.
What's the point of leadership without the obedience then?
Of course, yeah.
I want to give an example as well about the consultation, taking advice and obeying, or from the other aspect. But, with this example I wanted to give, because giving the example of the Prophet ﷺ is the best example for us. He used to consult his wife in important matters, and all of his wives. One such example is when he consulted Salama radiallahu ta'ala anha in a most critical situation, and concerning the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And her wise opinion was important in putting an end to that crisis. And it brought the matters back to normal.
SubhanAllah, indeed it did. It was a great sort of corruption and fitna that would have possibly been able to erupt at that time. And through her wise decision, it was automatically and quickly calmed. Barakallahu Fiki was a very good example there. Moving on from that then, how would you respond to those that say that the reference to the woman's ill conduct in this verse and the best way to deal with that appears more like one would be kind of disciplining a child as opposed to an adult within the relationship, two adults, within a relationship.
Interesting, point as well. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that ayah, that as to those women on whose part you fear ill conduct. It is very important to understand the Arabic word which is used in the ayah, nushuz. What does that mean? The literal meaning of the word nushuz is rebellion. But rebellion against whom and in what sense? So we cannot view this as rebellion of the ruled against a ruler or a dictator.
No.
Because that's not the case, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used the same word nushuz in the verse 28 in the same surah, verse 128 in the same surah, where it is said that if a woman feared nushuz on her husband's part.
Okay.
So nushuz is something that can be feared by husband on the wife's part and the wife from the husband's part. And an interesting point that we need to understand that the meaning of the word which is being used, and the correct way to understand is that it should be noted in both the verses. The reference to nushuz is followed by a reference to reconciliation or breakup of the marriage.
Interesting. Did you want to add something to that?
I just, the thing I want to say that, what a blessing it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying and commanding that when one of you fear rebellion, take an action as early as possible so that you can protect that family unit.
Mm-hmm. And, one would also be able to observe that a lot of, one of the reasons why marriages break down is that problems are allowed to accumulate, as opposed to kind of, as soon as that fear sets in, dealing with that, in a proper and effective way, and in this case, a staged way, as Allah Subhanahu wa Taala relates to us, and that another thing that I would say is that in consideration of the husband being in that leadership position in the marriage, then of course that it goes hand in hand that he would have the right to undertake those measures, those disciplinary measures, as being the leader,
Yes.
having leadership in that marriage. Sister Artika, then what acts would require disciplinary measures? I know that everyone's just wants to know. What acts?
Straight away, I would say that acts like, disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So, committing sin.
Yes.
Committing sin as an individual.
And then disobedience to her husband. And the other point is not admitting anyone into the home whom husband dislikes. So it can be anyone. Immoral act or cheating in the marital relationship.
Okay, so we're talking pretty serious acts of actions on the part of the wife. So if the husband comes home and doesn't find that the wife is cooked dinner, this is not one of those acts that would require disciplinary measure.
This is
just
what
to
we are
kind
saying.
of clarify here.
Yes, it's not like a simple argument where husband can take those measures.
No,
but it is, which is, these are the serious things which can break up the family unit.
Certainly. And I think, even setting aside the husband and wife relationship, if there's if there is a Muslim sister or brother or family member that you are aware, is disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is falling into sin, then out of your love for them and your fear, for them, you yourself take measures in order to make them aware, of the graveness of these actions, the consequences, of these actions. You want to help to support them in order to take them away, from that disobedience and that sin, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then what if a husband towards his wife, the husband loves his wife, the husband fears his wife, it's almost a natural consequence.
Yes.
You would expect that he would be taking some measures to help rectify the situation, but here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving him the measures, and he's not responding through anger or frustration or rage, but he's responding in obedience to Allah's commands, in a measured and staged and way, because we know that if we want to talk about violence against women, often it happens in the heat of the moment, in anger, in frustration and whatnot. Whereas here, it's almost like that's managed and put. It's managed in that this is the way that you. This is the.
Actually, take us through the steps. Take us through the way that you can deal. That's the best way you can deal with them.
If you
fear that rebellion.
Actually, on the note of nushuls, if I may ask, because you said that rebellion can happen both ways. What measures are available to the woman if she fears nushuls on her husband's part?
Straight thing. A wife, if she fears rebellion, then she can either ask one of the family member to come in between for the reconciliation, because
act
Allah,
as an arbiter.
Yes, as an arbiter, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that settlement is better. Now, and if this doesn't work, then separation is better for them.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah, we have in the Prophet the best example in the treatment of his women folk, which we're commanded to emulate as Muslims. He embodied kind treatment, and certainly we know he never lifted a finger against any of the women of his household. But how do we understand then the reality of how the Prophet ﷺ conducted himself with the allowance given in the ayah?
Rather than adding my own point, I would like to quote the hadith and the commentaries of the classical scholars. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Fear Allah with regard to women, for you have taken them as a trust from Allah." And classical scholars have, like Shaykh At-Tabari said, they have the right that their husbands should not harm them, and their husbands have a similar right over them. Ibn Zayd said, you should fear Allah concerning them just as they should fear Allah concerning you. But I would like to talk about the actual measures, like what are those actual disciplinary measures before I go into detail. That let's look at the verse and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala suggested. And it's those women on whose part you fear disobedience. 3 measures are recommended. Advise them first, leave them alone in bed, and hit them.
Okay.
It's simple, like advise them means explaining the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and encourage her to be obedient.
Okay.
And warn her against disobedience. And if it produces the desired result, then all well and all good. But if it doesn't, then the other measure which he can use as husband can, refuse to share the bed with her and not being intimate with her or by not sleeping. And if this doesn't work and it does not bring the desired effect, then the third measure, which is permitted, I want to make this point very clear that he is permitted, not obliged here or not encouraged, but he's permitted to hit her.
So how do we understand this?
SubhanAllah, that's what a beautiful, the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That he said not to take all the steps, at one time. It is one after the other. But before, I directly want to elaborate on what that, that
what
part
is.
And what is the third option is all about. That is what, everyone is talking about.
We're waiting until the end of the video to hear this.
And Al-Hasan al-Basri said that this means that it should not cause pain. So I'm talking about with the reference of hitting. What kind of hitting? Hasan al-Basri said this means that it should not cause pain. Atta said, I said to Ibn Abbas, what is the kind of hitting that is not harsh? He said, hitting with a siwak and the like.
A siwak?
Yeah, actually I got a siwak, because I wanted to show that what siwak is. It's a stick. It's a small stick. Used for cleaning the teeth.
May I have the honor?
Of course, yes. And, Shafi jurist, he said, a coiled scarf.
Coiled scarf.
That's another narration. And, what kind of hitting is that with a coiled scarf?
So we have a piece of fabric here just to demonstrate.
And in other narration, he said like a coiled or a folded handkerchief.
I mean, it's very evident that this is symbolic in nature, and it's not as what people have understood, or what people would like to have understood. So this is the reality of that third disciplinary option.
Yes, and with the different commentaries about striking, scholars emphasize that striking should be done in such a way as not to cause harm or pain. It's what kind of, in reality, what kind of hitting is that when it does not cause pain?
No.
And it is merely a symbolic act.
Okay.
Let's look at the manners of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best example for us. The qualities of mercy, kindness, leniency, and patience are seen from the personality of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there are many reports, when some of the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to argue. They used to argue with him, but he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was patient with them and never raised hands upon them. And in the farewell khutbah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "I enjoin good treatment of women." And and the other narration where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The best of you is the one who is best towards his wife, and I am the best of you towards my wife." These measures have been sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time, they are accompanied by stern warnings against misuse.
SubhanAllah, indeed.
In the end, I would like to remind myself and everyone of this hadith that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there is no person to whom Allah has given responsibility and dies neglecting that responsibility, but Allah will deny him paradise.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us.
Ameen.
SubhanAllah. Thank you so much, Sister Atika. Jazakallah khair. If I may just close with saying that, really taking the time to study and understand the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only builds on our appreciation of the greatness and wisdom of the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the human being with needs and instincts that is the same needs and instincts of today, and left him or her with a blueprint on life that, if adhered to, creates tranquility and justice not only within the home but in the society at large. We are not shy of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor of what it contains of guidance. We hear and obey all of its commands, and this only increases us in the conviction of its truth. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.